All right, fantastic. So why Strapi is awesome, and I might be biased to that, but I'll tell you about my journey starting with Strapi in just a minute. And today I wanted to talk about just Strapi in a nutshell, just in case someone brand new to it, talk about customizations, talk about DEETs, data export, import, transfer, why it was needed, why it was created, and showcase Strapi Cloud. And I'm Paul. I'm a Strapi addict or a developer advocate of Strapi. And the way I started at Strapi is I switched careers into web development later in my life, and I wanted to build full stack applications, but I did not have the know-how at the time how to create backends from scratch. So Strapi was an easy way for me to create projects as a front-end developer. And what I learned from that, besides the slide that I put here for no reason, I have two black cats. So if you see them jumping around the camera, sometimes they do that. One of them is really nice. The other one is kind of nice. I think it's because she likes PHP instead of JavaScript, but that's a whole other story. But the thing with Strapi for me that I like is don't try to reinvent the wheel. You know, the things you're trying to do, no matter how seemingly unique, have been done before. So take advantage of what other people created and build on top of that. And that's what Strapi means to me, is giving you that ability to have a starting point and to move forward. And as I was progressing through my development journey, one of the companies that got hired, they had majority of Python engineers, and their whole backend was built with Python, and they wanted to test out a new product. But the owner of the company, he's like, I can't take any of our Python developers and have them work on something new. And as a front-end developer, I was able to say, hey, let's build a POC of what you want, and I could use Strapi to set up the application. And what Strapi allowed me to do, allowed me to create a POC. The owner of the company really liked it, as a, you know, and he's like, what would the MVP look like? And so I was able to create an MVP, and to prove the concept, we were able to get some test users right away and see that, hey, that's a viable product. And he ended up hiring more engineers. And because, you know, the front end was React and Strapi was the back end, all in Node, all JavaScript, it was very easy to find help. And so I kind of like that idea, which allows you to take your idea to market much quicker. And this is what solidified to me my love for Strapi, is the fact that that's the tool that allows me to do that. So Strapi in a nutshell, it was created by Pierre, Jim, and Aurelian in 2015 to deal with the frustration of inability to deliver content anywhere. And also back at that time, they were building websites with WordPress. And WordPress is really good in some use cases, but they wanted to have something that, number one, uses a lot of the modern web dev technologies, like including like React, Node.js, and stuff like that. And so they wanted to have something that will allow people not only to have content delivered anywhere, but have a slightly better developer experience. And that has been the moving forward. And the cool thing about Strapi, it is open source, community driven. If you're not on our Discord server, 100% go there. I know a lot of you are. It's highly customizable based on Node.js. We have both REST and GraphQL, allows for fast development, and you have the freedom to use any framework, deliver content to any device, and you're able to either do it self-hosted, especially if you want to control your data, maybe you're a financial company or what have you. And we also now have Strapi Cloud that makes it easy for those of us who don't want to focus on the DevOps aspect of things, or just don't even want to worry about deploying a project to Strapi because you're just interested in providing a service to your customers. Strapi Cloud is a great option for you. And here's some of the latest features that we have. We have media library folders and list view, API tokens. You could customize your logo. We have our marketplace. We are introducing TypeScript support. It's not where we want it to be, but it's there. We have custom fields, which is pretty powerful and awesome. Obviously, we have our plugins. We have relationships, dynamic zones. You could reorder those. And with the introduction of DEETs, data import, export, and transfer, you have the ability to import, export your data, and you're also going to have the ability to transfer your data between environments, like if you have a local instance and a cloud instance. And we also recently rolled out or reintroduced role-based access control, RBAC system in the community edition. If those of you who've been using Strapi, you know that in the community edition, you only had a limit of 3 roles. And this was an enterprise feature that used to be a paid feature. And so now it's available for free, which gives you really granular access and control of what your Strapi admin users are able to do. And that literally goes to field level, which is pretty amazing. And our vision has been be the most developer-friendly CMS in the market, and we're doing our best to be that for our community and our developers. And moving forward into 2023, we want to continue to grow our Strapi Cloud offering and also to improve the editing experience for content editors and marketers. So we're trying to have that as our goal while still continue to be the best developer-friendly CMS on the market. And the best part about Strapi that I love is this idea of plugins or custom providers, custom fields, is that whenever you start Strapi, it comes with a lot of great functionality out of the box. But if something is missing, you're, number one, able to go to the marketplace and see if there's a plugin for you that could solve that particular use case. And if it doesn't exist and you create your own solution, you could share it with the world by creating a plugin and having it on our marketplace. And because of that, I really like the fact that Strapi literally allows you to implement whatever service or provider that you want to accomplish your goal. And I think that's a very amazing superpower of Strapi, is this customization and composability of things, of being able to decide and choose what you want to use in your project. And I'm going to start this talk with Strapi CLI. As somebody who initially started with Strapi, I was always working in the admin panel or in my code editor, but there are some pretty useful CLI commands that allow you to do certain things. And so there's many, but the ones that I'm going to mention today is generate, list, console. I'll touch on about export and import a little bit later in the presentation. But if you run yarn Strapi help, it'll show you all the different commands are available. And so the one that I'm starting to use more of now is yarn Strapi generate, because it allows you to scaffold your things much easier. For instance, you could scaffold the whole plugin, so you don't have to do that from scratch. You're able to create your APIs, controllers, policies, middleware, and content types, and so on. And it's a really great way for you to be able to do it right out of your CLI. So for instance, in the next example, if you wanted to create a middleware, you could literally do yarn Strapi generate and go through the options, check middleware. It's going to create that middleware with that basic scaffolding done for you. And if I'll show later in my demo if you have questions more about CLI commands when we do the live demo, but I just wanted to give a quick introduction here. The next command that I really like is the list command. So if you type yarn Strapi and the name, either content types, middleware, policies, controller, services, hooks, or routes, and then a colon and a list, it will give you a list of all the available either content types, middlewares, and policies. And if you look at the notation here, it's that global double colon, whatever the name is. A lot of this is what you use sometimes in your Strapi application when you're doing an entity service, or you want to reference a service, or you want to reference a controller. This is something that you kind of need to identify what you're trying to reference. And this, I find, list is a very easy way for me to kind of see what it is instead of trying to guess, like what was it supposed to be. So that's cool. And the last command that I wanted to share is Strapi console command, which allows you to basically run Strapi with interactive console mode that will allow you to evaluate or explore commands in your application. And it's great for testing, debugging. And for me, it's literally just Strapi API. So sometimes you could look at our documentation, and of course you could explore the code yourself, but you could also do it right in the console by doing yarn Strapi console, and then you'll write Strapi and hit enter. It'll show you all the available methods that are API. It literally shows you everything Strapi has to offer for you. So there's a lot of things you could do. I suggest if you haven't played with it, play it around. And in this example, and again, I could show this in live too, but just kind of go fast. In this particular instance, I just was doing Strapi.api, which is going to show you all the different things you have available inside your API folder. That could be your controllers, your content types, your policy services, and you could kind of see the methods that you have available, which is pretty cool. And if you have questions later, let me know. I'll be more than happy to show you this. And the biggest things that I really like about Strapi is the fact of its customizations, options, and the things that you can do. It literally, to me, is the superpower of Strapi, because when you get Strapi out of the box, it works. You were able to set up a basic website, and without doing anything to Strapi, you're able to have API endpoint that you could hit and see your content, which is pretty awesome. So for beginners, there's literally no barrier to entry. Kind of like I stated before, as a front-end developer, I was able to start with Strapi fairly easily, and over time to continue to see some of their deeper features. But because of that, it's easy to start. But if you want to add additional functionality, you have the ability to do that by literally customizing the routes, controllers, services, middlewares. We have policies, lifecycle hooks. You could add email providers. You could add storage providers and stuff like that. And to me, what makes Strapi great is that it allows people to customize it to their needs. And to me, literally, that's the superpower of Strapi. And just a quick overview, when we talk about routes, controllers, and services, it's a way whenever someone makes a request, it's going to hit your route. When a route gets hit, it will basically fire action that points to the controller, and once you hit the controller, it'll point to a service that has some sort of business logic that you're trying to do. So that's the basic flow when you're looking at routes, controllers, and services. Then we have our middlewares and policies. Like to think of them as they sit between routes and our controllers. And when I say middlewares, in this particular case, I'm talking about in Strapi route middlewares. And middleware is just any function that could change the request or flow of incoming requests that you get. And policies execute a specific logic before they reach a controller. And a good use case for policies is to checking if someone has certain permissions to do something. And you could customize both of those, middlewares and policies. Then we also have lifecycle hooks, are functions that get triggered anytime there's a query called. You're updating a content type, you're creating a content type, and it's a good place to perform certain automated actions or add additional functionality that you want. For instance, if you wanted to send an email after a content type has been created, you could use the after create lifecycle hooks. And some of the most common lifecycle hooks that we have is before create, after create, before update, and after update. And from just the admin standpoint of things, we have this concept of dynamic zones, which is allows you to give content editors a place or a way to choose what content is displayed dynamically. For instance, in this image we have our dynamic zone blocks, and it has dynamic zones or components like for media, quote, rich text, and sliders. So whenever a content editor is adding the content, they could decide, oh, I want to have one rich text block first. After the rich text blocks, I want to put a quote. And after quote, I want to put a image. So they put the media image, and then it's like, oh, I need another rich text block. So they could do it in whatever order they want, and it kind of gives that flexibility to the editor to decide how the content appears on the page. When we talk about components, think of it as a way to group like fields to create new structures for your application. For instance, here we have a meta title, meta description, and a shared image. All those fields are grouped in a component that will be called SEO that allows you to reuse it in your application in multiple places instead of having you to add these fields individually in your content types. And we also have this concept of API tokens that you could define from your front end. There's a couple of cool use cases. But basically, they allow you to make authenticated requests. And you could use it if you have one API talking to your Strapi application and you wanted to give certain rights. That's one way of using it. And you could define things based on all the content types you have and different controllers. So in this example, I'm giving permissions to the article content type or controller. I have a custom control in there called find by slug, and then I'm giving permission for find one and find. And so this is going to generate a token that I would have to pass in my request in order to have access to these permissions. And I like to use it like sometimes, like for instance, the way I use it in my current project, I have a Next.js website. And even though I could set everything to public, but what that means is that anybody could go to, that URL and see, the data structure, or not the response that it gets. But I wanted to just only allow people from my Next.js be able to get the data. So instead of having it publicly open, instead it requires this API token to be passed in a request to get the data. So the only way you're able to get the data, even if you know my backend URL, is to go through the front-end application that in the background is passing the API token that gives the permission to see the public data. And before I kind of show you the code, I just want to show you like a project that I created. And what I love about Strapi is that you can create whatever you like. And in this particular example, as a joke, because I'm lazy, I built a Chrome extension that takes a YouTube short video and will write a comprehensive blog post that automatically gets posted to my website, so I don't have to worry about it. And in this example, you see that I have Strapi Chrome extension, which has Strapi auth. You log in, you pass a link, and it'll go ahead and generate this amazing post, and it will go ahead and publish it on my website. And if somebody asks, why did I create this app? To be honest, there's a little disclaimer message. That project was built out of spite. So I have this friend who always takes some ideas that I have, and then he converts them to paid courses, because he's like, although Paul showed it for free on his channel, I'm going to go ahead, take that knowledge, bundle it up, and sell it. And so I was kind of a little upset about it. So I specifically created this plugin so I could take his short videos and convert to blog posts. I mean, you don't have to judge me, but that's what I did. Of course, I'm joking, but the idea is you have all these different things that Strapi could be the glue to what it does. And so a lot of people think of websites, people think of mobile apps, and here I am. I created a Chrome extension to help me accomplish that. So I love that flexibility about it. So the reason why I use Strapi to do that, because I am making some requests to my OpenAI account, and I didn't want to publicly have that OpenAI token being called from my front end of application. Sometimes you accidentally may leak it or what have you, so I didn't want to have any chance. So what I did is I used Strapi as a way to obfuscate that logic and have my Chrome extension or my website call my Strapi application. And I gave permission that you have to be a logged in user in order to use it. So it's another way for me to use Strapi to kind of encompass the service that I want to do. And so what this plugin does, it will download a white YouTube video from a URL. It will convert it to MP3. It will take that MP3 and send it to OpenAI Whisper language model, which basically transcribes audio to transcript. Once that transcript is done, I take that transcript and pass it to OpenAI text completion, which is going to take that transcript and with some prompting convert it into a blog post. And then once that blog post is created, is blog post to my Strapi instance and send me a link saying, hey, a new blog post was created. And so for this particular project, the things that I had to customize is I had to use the register function in index.js. I'll show you that in just a second. I had custom routes, controller services, middlewares, live cycle hooks, and my email provider. So let's take a look at the code here. Let me see here, make sure I have the right thing open here. So is this? Yes. So, and let me just know if the screen is too, if you could easily read. So I'll start first in the index.js file. And so there's many ways to customize things, but for this particular example, I knew that I need to have my OpenAI configurations, and I wanted to make it global. In the past, I stuck it into a controller. So every time I would call that controller, this would call every time. And so I was like, I only need this once. And so what I was able to do within the register function, I was able to initialize the OpenAI API with my API key and then save that inside the Strapi global object under OpenAI. And so what that allowed me to do is to set it once at the beginning when my application starts before anything happens. And so later I could use Strapi.OpenAI to reference my configuration and all the methods that have there. So if you want to set a global variable, or you want to, in the above example here, creating custom GraphQL resolvers. So if you want to extend the plugin that you need to do once when the application starts, like the register function is a great place to do it. So for this particular project, literally setting my open AI and initializing, so I have access to those methods, and it's going to be stored within the Strapi global object. And then afterwards, I created inside my API, I created an API called OpenAI, and it consists of routes, services, and controllers. So we'll start with routes. So I have my OpenAI route, which has one endpoint. Like, so whenever someone goes to OpenAI Summarize, this is going to fire my Create Video Summary controller. And if we go to my controllers and take a look, and let me know if I'm going too fast, if I'll make the screen a little bit bigger so you can see it, like I'll slow down. Once you go to OpenAI controller, I have my controller here that gets called, that uses a couple of different services that I created. And this is like, the emphasis here is that whatever idea you have, you're able to implement it with Strapi because you have the power to create custom controller services and so on. And so I created a couple of utility functions that the download video file will handle downloading the file from YouTube. Then I created another utility service that will convert the video to audio. And then I created a service called, I forgot what I called it. Let me take a look here. Almost like irrelevant services. I guess I called it OpenAI request, and I guess that was there right there. And so what that does, it has a couple of different methods for whatever I want to do. And I just pass, like, I want a transcription or I want a text completion. And so what this allows me to do is to add additional custom logic to accomplish the goal that I want. And so my controller here will call all these services to fire the functionality that I want. And if we take a look at services, I'll start with utils. Here's a service that I created that is responsible for downloading a video file from YouTube. Does some logic here that allows me to do that. Temporarily save it to the system until it's done. Does the same thing. Once it receives the downloaded video, it will convert it to audio. After that is done, I'm calling my OpenAI request, to which I'm passing my payload, which basically has the prompt or the thing that I want to do. And for the time being, I put everything into this one kind of service. And as you can see here, at this moment, I have create transcription, create completion, and then I have a switch statement that checks, like, which one are you asking for? And that will handle that response, creating that post. Once that is done, I want to send an email. And so I was like, you can, for instance, inside your controller here, add a thing that calls your email service. But I was like, do I want it to be inside the controller, or is there like a more appropriate place to do that? So I do generate my post here, but in order to send the email, I decided to use a lifecycle hook. And so if you take a look in my APIs on the short posts in content types, I have my life cycles, which allows you to add whatever life cycles you want. And this particular example, I'm using after create. So once the blog post is created, it's gonna go ahead and I've created a very simple email template here, and it'll go ahead, call my Strapi service that I created that will send that email saying, hey, somebody just created that post. And for that, I use Strapi generate and said, generate a service. You give it a name. I called it send email, and I just put very simple logic or what I want to do, and I'm using the Strapi's email plugin to send the email. And so I hope you could see that with Strapi and the power of the customization, you could take any idea that you want and bring it to life. And in this example, I showcased how to go ahead and create a Chrome extension that allows you to transcribe and summarize videos. And for instance, just to test that, I have this running locally. I would make sure that I'm a logged in user. It helps if you start your application, by the way. Actually, let me do it here. So I don't know if anybody has, while I find my bearings, anybody had this happen in their VS Code. If you're using VS Code to start your project, once you do Control-C to stop it, it won't stop it. It'll still run it in the background. I don't know if it's just me, but I'll just do it here. Yeah, and develop. And so, and I'll show you this in action. So once everything starts, so I'm able to log in first. So once I logged in, because I don't want people just to abuse my OpenAI token, so you have to be a logged in user, you have to have an account to use it. And then when I go to generate blog post, make sure that I have the proper BR token provided. When I click send, it's going to go ahead and go through all those functions that I showed you. So for instance, it says video downloaded, transcribing audio, and so on. Then it'll show you the transcript. And then once I have the transcript from Whisper AI, it sends this to text completion AI, where it's going to take the text, and I provided a prompt that basically says, takes this transcription and turn it into a blog post and return it to me in Markdown. And this takes a little bit of time, but once this is done, it's going to return a, as you could see here, it returns a whole blog post in Markdown that gets created and saved to my Strapi instance. And then it automatically files an email. And I just got an email on my phone here saying, hey, somebody just published a blog post. And so to me, like, why I'm excited with this is that I had an idea. I didn't want to spend too much time on it from the perspective of like, do I create the backend from scratch myself? What else do I use? And Strapi was kind of like that glue that allowed me to take my idea, bring it to market much faster. And so I was able to go from idea to a thing that I could show you today fairly quickly. And to me, that's like a huge superpower, because I feel as a business owner or a company owner, your main goal is to take your product to the market as quickly as possible. And the benefit of Strapi is that it gives you a place to get started. It works out of the box. So as a developer, you could start adding your custom features, but also content editors could start working on entering data into Strapi at the same time. So you could literally parallel, which will reduce your time going to market. And as a developer, you're not worried about the content, right? You should never ask a developer to, hey, can you change this content, or can you add this blog post? It's not the good use of your time. And this is another benefit that I find with Strapi. So let's look at another example. And this is the one that we're going to push to the cloud today. So I created another like very simple blog example, and the customizations that I did here, I wanted to create a route for my custom controller called Find by Slug, which allows me to find posts by slug, because don't ask me why this is not a native feature of Strapi yet. I don't know, but right now you're able to find things by ID. So you could easily create a custom controller. And I'll talk a little bit, little caveat about customizing controls in a second. Then I created a middleware. There's an amazing blog post that I'll quickly talk to you about. But a lot of times, if you have certain data that you know what the response is going to be, instead of using the QS library or LHS syntax to put that into a query from your front end, since you already know what data you want back, you could actually create a middleware which will apply that custom filtering before it gets sent to the front end. So allowing you to keep your front end, lean. Then I created a policy here, a very simple one, which is basically we'll test if you want to update a article, are you the author? Do you have the permission to update, which is a perfect use case for policies. Then I created a simple lifecycle hook example after update. And the idea I wanted to do is, like, sometimes when people from their front end update the application, maybe they forget to send their slug for whatever reason, or generate the slug. Let the backend generate it automatically based on the title. And dynamic zones I talked about, API tokens I talked about, but I'll briefly touch on that in just a second. So let's take a look at that code example here. Let me just stop this application. Okay, make sure it starts. And let me go here, refresh this. This is going to open the new one. So here's my simple blog application. And when I was talking about dynamic zones, just to kind of show you a quick example. So if you look at the content type builder, here's that slide that I showed you earlier, giving you ability to be able to choose what you want. And from the content editor perspective, when they go to create a new blog, right? They add their data, they have this add a component to the blog, and they're able to select what they want. Do they want a media file? It's like, I want to have a quote. After the quote, I want to have a rich text. After the rich text, I want to have a media file again. So it gives ability to content editors to dynamically decide what to display, which is kind of cool. I'm not going to save that, but just wanted to share that with you. Also, from the standpoint of the API tokens here, if you go into settings, API tokens. So I wanted to make sure that when people land to my Next.js site or what have you, I want to give whatever's publicly available. I still want from my Next.js site make a authenticated request. So I created a token which has custom settings, which basically only allows people from my Next.js who are not logged in to either find article by slug, get all the articles, or if they provide the ID, find by ID. Now, the reason why I wanted to show you this example, so in Strapi, you're able to create controllers from scratch. You're able to wrap and override existing controllers, and or somewhere in between. So out of the box, you have your controllers, find one, create, update, delete. So what typically people do when they customize Strapi, they'll be like, I want to have the functionality to find things by slug. So what they will do, and this is something I've done in the past, and this, I'll tell you why this is bad, is they'll take the find one controller and they're going to override it with the custom logic, find it by slug. And yes, that will work, but here's two issues. Issue number one, you took a core controller that expected behavior and you overrid it to do something else, like find by slug. So now if someone that doesn't know that I overwritten that controller, they go, oh, find one expects an ID. They pass an ID and hey, it's broken, it doesn't work. And so if you're going to add additional functionality or you're thinking of overriding or extending controllers, what I would say, leave the core controllers as is. And this is like my personal preference, and create a whole new controller like I did for this find by slug. And the reason I suggest you do that, one, the one that I just mentioned, because you don't want to mutate like what people expect of the core controllers to do. And number two, like whenever you go to migrate your Strapi from v4 to v5, there's going to be, I'm sure, like a auto script that will help you to take and migrate those controllers. So if you like customize all your core controllers, it won't know how to handle that. And so you'll have more work during that migration process to go ahead and update everything yourself. Where if you have custom logic and you put in a separate controller, when you migrate your application, all the core controllers like find one, update, delete, create, and find will get updated automatically, and you'll only be left in redoing if you're going to do it for your redoing the logic for your custom controllers. So I wanted to throw that out there. So taking a look at the code, just kind of basic customization that I did, and I could close this one so it doesn't bother me. Basic customizations I did for this particular application. Number one, I created a custom controller, I believe, for articles that basically adds the ability to be able to find your article by slug. In order for this to work, you do need to create a custom route that references that. So I created a file I called routes.js to which I added that controller. I also wanted to make sure that I have it called the middleware that I created, which, like I mentioned before, will pre-filter and only return the things that I want, so I don't have to worry about doing it from the front end. So once my find by slug controller gets hit, inside the configuration, I said, hey, use this middleware. And let's take a look at the middleware. Articles middleware here. And basically what it does is, so if you're building a front-end application, of course, you could do all your populate filtering from the front end, but I already know what content I'm expecting. This is the thing that I want to return. So I'm literally inside the middleware saying, hey, for the user, I only need the first name, last name, bio, and email. For the cover, when you return the image, I only want name, alternative, text, captions, width, height, and URL. That's it. I don't need any of that additional stuff. And then I'm doing the same thing for the file, which is image of the avatar. But I'm basically just, again, saying just return the name, alternative text, and so on. And so whenever anybody makes a request to get the articles, this middleware gets triggered, and it basically returns the query based on these filters or these populate flags. And so that way I don't have to do that from the front end. And to kind of, and I'll show you that in just an example. And then the only other thing that I did here for this particular post for articles under life cycles, I wanted to use before update. And what I wanted to do here, basically what this code does, if someone forgets to pass a slug from the front end, it will go ahead and create it for them automatically. This is basically what this does. And I'll show you this in example here. So we go to demo 2. And first, let me just show you here. If we go to middlewares, actually, let's go to routes, articles. Let's do find one. So notice find one is using my middleware. And so I just want to show you the difference. So if I turn off the middleware for find one, and inside my the Insomnia here, I believe it's get post by ID. If I run the request, notice how it doesn't return all the fields. Like if you don't specify anything, it's just going to return the first level of fields. And so some people will do something like this. They will do populate, and they would do like star. You could learn more about it in our documentation, and I should probably spell right. And when you click send, then it will return everything. And notice, like, I have all this information, like for the images, and it's this like bigger response that I get back. And so instead of like having to write these filters from the front end or pass, like what I'm doing is literally just using a middleware to populate that automatically. And so now when I send this request, notice if in terms of like images, I'm not returning like all that extra information. I'm only returning what I needed. And for this particular case, I just want the name, the attribute text, the URL. And so you're able to, from your middleware, dictate what you want to return. And I think it's a really good pattern, especially when you know the structure of your response. And I'll share this link with you somewhere, but Kellen, one of our solution engineers, wrote this article on route-based middlewares to handle default population, just because it's been like something really common that people have been using. And he just talks about like what he does, talks about what middlewares are. And, you know, when you have like huge structures, like writing response from the front end, especially if people want to use like LHS syntax, it just becomes very unruly. And instead of like trusting, like making that from the front end, you first of all simplify the process and use QS library to basically be able to define your filters in this object format, which I think like this is way more readable than using the LHS syntax. And then number two, instead of making this on your front end, you go ahead and you create a middleware. And here he actually, using our Strapi generate CLI command, clicking middleware, creating a middleware, adding it to the existing code base, what have you. And then once he has this basic scaffolding, he adds the logic. And it's basically like similar to what I showed you before, but you're able to, within your middleware, basically define the query that you want and return it to the user. So I thought that was like a really good example of using middlewares. Let's see, where's my code here? And so another thing that I wanted to do here, and this is like another interesting way that I'm using after update, for instance, update article here. Let me actually go ahead, try to go to JSON here. So let's say I forget to like pass a slug or it's empty, and I click send. Number one, it's going to tell me you're not the author of the article. And so where did this logic comes from? It comes from me creating a policy. And right here, I have a policy called is article author. So it basically check when you're making a request as a logged in user, are you the author of that article? If you're not the author, I'm throwing an error. Like for instance, if you're missing, like you didn't provide any credentials, it'll say missing valid credentials. But if the user exists, article exists, but you're just not the right owner, it will say, hey, you're not the author of the article. And so let me go ahead and, I don't remember which one it was. I'll try this one. Let me see. I think it was the article that Paul made. Let me just pass the right token here. Update article. It's one of the two. Yep. And so let's go back here. So here, forgetting to add anything here in the slug. When I click send, notice that, notice how the slug automatically gets generated, even though I forgot to add it from the front end. And where this logic is happening and where I placed it is within my code base, within my content types. I create a lifecycle.js file, and I was like, hey, let's put that logic before update. And I showed you this before, but check if there's a slug. If there isn't no slug, like go ahead and generate it based on the title. So I wanted to share that kind of to showcase that whenever you're creating something, you have all the customizations that you're able to do, and there's literally your imagination is the limit. So let's go back to my slide. So now let's take a look at Strapi Cloud. So Strapi Cloud, like I said, you know, if you're you have very specific use cases, there's nothing wrong of, you know, either hosting things yourself or creating your own infrastructure. But for a lot of people, literally, they just want to have an easy way to deploy their application because they're more interested in not worrying about the deployment process and managing that. Maybe the team is small, maybe you don't have the resources. You just want to have a service that does that because you want to focus on your product. And so it's fully hosted and managed, easily able to create a new project, or if you have an existing project, point to your existing projects and deploy it to Strapi Cloud, scale as you grow. The deployment process is fairly straightforward. You have automatic backups and different database support. Although for most users, the default Postgres database will be perfect. And some of the features that we currently have, you automatically get an email provider, you get CDN, you have real-time logs to see what's happening with your application, and you also have email notification. And before we move to deets, let me go ahead here, simple blog. Let me just check my code, make sure I didn't add anything. Yeah, that looks fine. And so now if I wanted to publish this to Strapi Cloud, all you need to do is have this project saved on GitHub, which it already is. And so what I'm able to do is go to Strapi Cloud. So you will be presented with your dashboard. I have a couple of different projects here. And I know like another common questions, a lot of people ask about multi-tenancy, which means a lot of different things for a lot of people. And true multi-tenancy, this is not what I'm talking about, but what I'm talking about when people say multi-tenancy, they're literally saying, I just have one place to manage my projects. So let's say you're like a marketing agency and you're managing a bunch of different Strapi projects for your customers. Well, Strapi Cloud allows you to manage all those different projects from within your admin panel. So we're going to go ahead and create a new project. And I should probably refresh, make sure that I'm logged in. Okay. Log in first, because I didn't automatically log out. You use your GitHub to log in. Once we're here, this will allow us to create a project. If you've never tried Strapi Cloud, you do have a 14-day free trial. Because I've used Strapi Cloud a bunch of times, I don't have that luxury. So we have two plans, $99 a month. This is what you get. And then if you're a team, it's $4.99. But any regard, you get 14-day trial. You click next. Basically, it's going to ask you to provide a repo of the project you want to deploy. You click next. If you had any additional environmental variables that you wanted to add under Show Advanced Settings, you could click and add your variables, something that I don't need to do. Because Strapi automatically will set up all the required variables for you anyway. You click next, you have your information, click create, and that's it. That's all it took. It's going to go ahead and start this process of deploying the project to the cloud. So we'll come back to that in a second, because this is going to take a minute or two or more. But while that is happening, let me go ahead and talk about deets. So deets is our answer to make migration for people much easier. So if you ever migrated from Strapi V3 to V4, we did have migration scripts that made things a little bit easier, but there were still use cases where, okay, it wasn't like quite working like it should, because everybody names things differently or they change things afterwards. So we wanted to create deets, which allows you, number one, to make backing up or taking your data from your application much easier. So we have the export and import function. This is something that I'm going to talk about first. And then we have our transfer function that will allow you to move things between your applications. The biggest caveat is whatever application you're importing or exporting to or transferring to, the schema has to match exactly, otherwise it's not going to work. But the reason this was created, and this code, there's no documentation on this yet, but the goal is for people be able to have access to programmatically to be able to create their own providers for their specific use case. Maybe you have a client that wants to move their data from WordPress to Strapi. This doesn't exist, but you can programmatically use the underlying deets code and create your own provider that will allow you to do that. And this is kind of like the future of where we want to go and do. At the moment, we have export and import. When you run yarn Strapi export, they have a couple of different flags. In this flag, I'm saying don't encrypt anything. F just says like, hey, this is the name of the file that I want to create and where you want to store it. And what it's going to do when you export, it's going to export it in the tar GZ file format. And if you expand that folder, you're going to have everything in folders within assets, your configuration, your entity, your link, your schema. So everything that you have saved in your Strapi application outside of admin users will be in one of those folders. And then when you want to import, all you would do is you would run Strapi import, the file name, where it's located, and it's going to import the data. So we didn't do it yet because I want to show you a quick demo of that. So here's my simple blog. I did have a couple of blog posts in there, and let me just clear this. And so if I wanted to export all the files, I would run yarn Strapi. And if you ever forget, like what the flags are, let's do export. You could go ahead and ask for help. And so I'm going to use no encrypt flag and then like the file name. So let's do yarn Strapi, and we'll go ahead do no encrypt. And I can't type and speak at the same time, so my apologies. And then /f, and I'm going to say, let's call it backup. Let's actually put it in there. And then when I do that, it's going to go ahead and yarn Strapi. Very important. Don't forget to put the thing that you're trying to do. I want to export, no encrypt, file backup. Click enter, and it's going to go ahead. And notice it went ahead and exported all my files, and it saved it into that backup tar file. And if I go yarn develop for just a moment, and go inside my application here. And I'm going to go ahead into my contents articles. I'm just going to delete everything, right? And so now it's empty. There's no items here. I could also go into media library and delete all the images. And so I deleted stuff. There's no more data in this Strapi application. And so what I'm able to do now is, since I have that backup file, I'm able to go ahead and import yarn Strapi import file, and I called it backup, boom. And then it will go ahead, very important, whenever you are in files, it will completely nuke everything and import that data that you import. There's no selective import at the moment. So let's say yes to proceed. So when I head and imported that data. So if we go back to our Strapi application, run your application first, yarn develop. And when that runs, let's refresh. Let's go to our articles, and boom, here you see our articles and you see our images and data. So that is a pretty cool functionality. So before we end here, let's take a look at our Strapi application. So it's still deploying. It's going to take a minute. So like sometimes it takes a minute or two or 5 or 10. It's just the process of moving your application to the cloud. It's almost there, but I wanted to show you transferring data, but let's see.
Can I ask you one question in the meantime while it's building?
Yeah, go ahead.
You were showing at a certain point the overview of what you standard would get with Strapi Cloud.
Yes.
And it mentioned the number of articles, etc. What if you exceed all those numbers? Because it didn't show what the cost would be if that would be the case.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I don't have the exact number on top of my mind, but you will have a prorated price based on how much extra data you used past the recommended. So I don't have that number off the top of my head, but that's what happens. So you get your standard, and if you go over the limit, it's not like, oh, you can't do anything. It's like you get a prorated rate based on, number of entries or so on. So yeah, great question, by the way. So go ahead.
Yeah, you will get a higher bill.
Yeah, you get a higher bill. Yeah, like any service, the more you use it, the more you get charged.
Yeah.
That reminds me, I have to, like, I have so many streaming things like Netflix, like whatever. I got to cancel some of them. That's like a great point. So I think our project is deployed. So let's go overview. Let's see here. So it's done. Let's go here. Yeah, everything looks good. Yep, it's running. Fantastic. Overview. App URL, visit app. So let's go ahead and log in, admin. Because this is first project deployed, there's no user created. So you will be prompted to create your first admin user. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Paul Bratslavsky. My last name is so long, sometimes even I can't spell it. Strapi. Strapi.io. And
Can I ask
I
another
think,
question in the meantime, Paul?
yeah, as many as you like.
Yeah, because I think what you are now doing and trying to show is that you moved your application. Yeah, you are about to. Yeah. You have moved it to Strapi Cloud.
Yes.
But I assume that there would be front end on top of your what you had before. Where's the front end now?
So very good question. So for this particular topic, what I did is I just wanted to focus more on the Strapi part of it. But the beauty of this is that literally your front end could be like living anywhere. So you just need to point to the back end of like your Strapi URL that wherever it's hosted. For instance, like this Strapi Chrome extension that I did. My front end where the blogs get displayed, I have this particular project is in Remix JS.
So basically, when you go over to Strapi Cloud, the Strapi Cloud instance knows where the front end is.
Right, and you would set that up. So it's not Strapi instance; it's your front end knows where the Strapi instance is. So wherever you so for instance. Wherever I deployed, like I think I used Netlify for that Remix. So in my Remix project, that's where I define my env variable to say, hey, this is where the Strapi instance lives. So you point your front-end application to your Strapi instance.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, but perfect. And so let's see here. And here's my project deployed to cloud. And as you saw, like I didn't really have to do anything except point to my, let me change it to a light mode, save. So I just pointed to my GitHub and it's done. And for a lot of users, like having this hassle-free experience is super important. And so now if I wanted to move my data, this is where transfer function would of our deeds would apply. Now, we still have a couple of different things we're trying to work out with the transfer, but I'll talk about the general process here. So I have my local project here that I have running, and then I have my cloud project running on Strapi Cloud. In order for me to point to this project, I need to create a transfer token. So if I go into settings, and we have this option here, transfer token, you could create a token. You could, I'm just going to call it true. You could define, you want it 7 days, 30 days, 90 days. I'm going to say unlimited. And you could do push pull. You could allow full access. So this token will work to either push data or pull data. I'm going to say full access for simplicity. And we'll come back to this in a second. And to move my project, I need to have the URL of where it lives on the cloud /admin. And I'm going to stop my local project here. And I'm going to do yarn transfer, yarn Strapi help transfer just to transfer to see the flags that we have available. So if I want to push and move the data from my local, I would use the to flag where I provide my URL to where I want to move it, and then that token that we just created. So I'm going to do yarn Strapi transfer, and you want to provide to token.
This is also, by the way, if you do all the way around. it's very nice for developers as well. Let's say you have a production machine somewhere in the cloud. You would pull your whole production down to your machine display as well.
That's the
production from it locally. It's very useful that way.
Yeah, exactly. We're still working on, there are a couple of things, known issues, but I just want to show you like this idea, and we're prioritizing fixing them, but I just wanted to show you where we are with, so not two token. I thought I copied my thing, my URL. So I want to make sure I have my cloud URL here. Again, yeah, this feature is like fairly new, so like anything new. So I put my URL, so it's my Strapi URL/admin. And then after that, we want to put our token. So let me go ahead and to my cloud instance, copy my token to clipboard, save, and then provide my token, click enter. And it's going to go ahead, again, same warning as before. It will nuke your existing database that you have. I think in the future, we're going to have this ability. I just don't know when we're going to do this. But for now, like you'll be able to pick and choose. But at the moment, it literally will nuke your database. So important caveat here, if you already have data in your Strapi application, like make sure it's backed up and saved just in case, because this is going to nuke it. Click yes, and it's going to go ahead and start the transfer here of my data to the Strapi application. And depending on your internet connection, my connection here is a little bit slow, so this is going to take the time. But what this is doing is taking my local data that I showed you on my local environment, and it's pushing it to my cloud instance that I just deployed. And it's going to take some time to complete, but that is yes. And the pull functionality worked the same way. There's couple of known issues with the transfer. So right now, transferring to the cloud, it's going to be actively worked on, next week and forward until it is fixed. One of the issues we're having, if you have custom providers and you upload data to your Strapi Cloud, it won't set those images to your upload provider, and instead it will save them inside your public upload folder to file. And this is something that's known and that's being fixed. But I did want to kind of show you that this is the feature that we're working on. And I did want to mention that it has issues, just so everybody from our team who hears this understands how important this is, which we all know. We just everybody's busy, that we work on it actively to fix. But all I had for the presentation today. Any questions, anything that you want to ask? I may not know all the answers, but I will definitely try to answer anything I know. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Any questions from Slovenia or Eindhoven? Apparently not.
You guys are amazing, and girls.
Well, I'm curious to hear maybe about this. I can imagine and also read some next steps already about 5 as well at some point, right? There's going to be at some point maybe a Strapi 5, but I guess this whole import, output, export functionality is gonna require the data model part to be really stable in the future, right? To be able to work with this cross version, for example.
Yeah, and so I don't know all the technical details of how the feature was built. It's like outside of my understanding at the moment. But they are literally right now because the stability of the things that you mentioned, it's not even required for Strapi 5. It's required to have consistent transfer to the cloud. And because cloud is such a big thing, we're proactively working on fixing this. In terms of migrating things, because the way it works in the back end of like the underlying code, you define like your starting schema and your ending schema, and it will automatically be able to move the data. And so migrating from V4 to V5 using this feature would actually be way easier than it was in the past. And because that's how it works, what's cool about it, outside of just using it to migrate your Strapi app V4 to V5, we will give you access. There's just no documentation yet because this is actually a worked on feature, but you will have access to be able to write your own provider based on our Deets feature, where you have your source schema and you have your destination schema. Like in the previous example I mentioned, you may have like your WordPress and write a provider that will move your WordPress data to your Strapi data. And that's like the eventual goal.
Right, makes sense. Yeah.
Basically, how I understood it from my end is you have two providers for Strapi for the transfer system. You have an input provider and an output provider. So everything basically goes to the same middleware, basically. That's the goal.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Paul? Then, Paul, thank you very much. And I want to give the floor to Ernst and Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.